Join me in this practice of found poetry. It's a sacred time. And while you can use any book that you find anywhere, I usually have a few different types of books that I am looking for. And in this video, I will be using pages from 3 books, the 3 books you see here. One on the wolves of Yellowstone. Nature imagery is wonderful for found poetry. One book on prayer and a memoir by Henry Nouwen called The Road to Daybreak to add in some spiritual language. And finally, a book on being that I have not read and yet had some language that I really appreciated. So when I look for pages to use in my found poetry practice, I flip through whatever book that I have chosen to use. And these books I get from half-price books or thrift stores or other used bookstores. Even Goodwill often has good choices. And I look for language in each page that stands out. There might only be 3 or 4 words that stand out in particular, but when I see a page that has something that draws me, I rip it out. And then as you see here, I cut around the margins so that all that's remaining is the column of words. And once I've cut around the margins, I simply begin cutting the words in thin strips. I love this meditative practice. This is a practice that I do sometimes if I'm watching TV with my family, or if I'm accompanying one of my kids or a family member to a doctor's appointment and I have some time in the waiting room. All you need are a pair of scissors, a place to collect your words, a Ziploc bag or a little container, and a few deep breaths. So as you can see, these 3 pages that I have chosen, one from each of the books that we mentioned, have different fonts. They even have different spacing in their words, and the variety is always fun to find. So I look over both the front and the back of the page, and I notice a couple things. I notice if there are gaps in the words, like in this portion of the diary by Henry Nouwen. There are gaps on both sides of the page, so I cut accordingly. I trim out these strips and then continue flipping the page over just to make sure that I'm cutting along the lines. Sometimes you'll find that a page does not have words that line up on both front and back, but I try to find books that do line up so that when I clip the strips out, it's a surprise. Do I use the front of the strip or the back? So as you see here, I'm adjusting based on the gaps in the words. And one thing that I value about this practice of clipping the words into strips first is that it completely removes context for the words in the book. The language remains, but you no longer know what it's saying in the larger scheme of things. And you can see the words in their uniqueness. You can see the words for what they are, each individual phrase, each word, even parts of words stand out. I like looking for books that have different size fonts. This particular page that you see me cutting out now has smaller words, and also the lines of text are closer together, so it requires a little more attention and focus as I'm cutting. But again, this practice of clipping the words in strips is not just for the finished product of the found poetry. It is in itself a meditation. It is in itself a slowing down. You can't rush this practice. You will cut into the words. You will miss something. So be slow and let each page offer you the quiet and the stillness that it might want to share. Once I have at least 2 or 3 pages worth of strips to clip, I then just mix them up. Because again, I don't want the context. I don't want the words from the same book to all be together. And then I choose a strip and I study it. I look at it and see what words in particular shimmer for me. I'll flip the strip over to see what might surprise me on the other side. You'll notice as I'm clipping that I sometimes clip out a single word, or maybe a word with an article, a the or an an. And sometimes I clip a whole phrase. Sometimes it's simply an adjective with a noun that seems to go together. Sometimes it's a whole prepositional phrase, a whole 4 or 5 word phrase that goes together. And sometimes I waffle. I'm not sure where to put a certain word. Do I put it with these later words or the ones that come before? I find that when I do this practice this way, there are so few wasted words. Maybe a few, maybe a handful of words don't make the cut, so to speak. Sometimes you'll find that a page of text has too many proper nouns, too many names for things that you don't feel like you will use. And I don't particularly choose those pages very often. But for the most part, aside from proper names and numbers, I use everything. You never know when a word is out of context what it might stir in you when you finally take the words out to use in a found poem. I think what's most important for me in this process is that I trust the words themselves to emerge when they're exactly needed. I have had too many times of the Spirit's movement, of serendipity, where words that I might have clipped months or even years ago turn up at the exact right time. In leading retreats and offering this practice to others, there have been goosebump moments that I could never have hoped for or planned. That the word needed, the word that had just been on the tongue of a person in their sharing, miraculously appears in their little group of clippings. So I invite you today, as you do some clipping of your own, to trust the words that emerge. To let yourself forget where these words came from, what book they came from, what topic, what chapter, and instead just see them with new eyes. This little bowl of clippings that you see me adding to is my bowl of loaves and fishes. It is so abundant it never runs out. There are some seasons where I don't add to it at all, and other seasons where I don't create found poetry, I just add to the pile. So once I'm done clipping the strips into words and phrases, I mix them up in my bowl, and then when it's time to create, I simply take a pinch and I spread it out before me. I'm always curious about the words that come up. One of the most important tips I have for you as you engage this practice is to not only take out and use the words that resonate for you in a way that's comfortable. Maybe there are words that are distinctly uncomfortable and that you resist, and yet maybe those are the words that most want to be used in a poem. Of course, if there are words that are challenging and triggering for you, they might not want to be used in a poem. But I think often it's not only the words and images and thoughts and practices that feel most comfortable and aligned with where we are that have something to offer. It's all often the places of misalignment or challenge that have the most to share. So I spread out my words, I notice what's there, I give them each some room, and then I just pay attention.